Buen día tengan todos ustedes. Vamos a dar comienzo a esta plática con el doctor Phillip Grange. Le damos la bienvenida. Estamos muy contentos de estar aquí con un compositor que ha estado, si no en todos, casi en todas las ediciones del festival. En esta ocasión, Phil nos hablará algo de su trabajo. Y pues bueno, creo que sin más preámbulos, demos la bienvenida al doctor Phil Grange. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. It's nice to sort of be there.
Okay. Entonces, so we're going to start with Dr. Phil Grange.
Okay. Hello, everybody. And it's nice to see that you've got lots of sun there. It's pouring with rain here near Manchester. Because the arts are being so badly affected everywhere by nature in the form of the current COVID-19 pandemic, I thought today I would discuss two of my pieces inspired by nature in positive ways. These two pieces are Tears of Time for piano quartet, written in 2007, and my violin concerto, which was completed and premiered only last year, 2019. The first piece, Tears of Time, that I'm going to discuss, was inspired by the landscape of the area where I live in the UK. This is called the Peak District, and it's south of Manchester, where I worked in the university for many years. Oscar, thank you very much. So I don't know whether you can see that, but Manchester is about halfway up that map in the middle, well, to the left-hand side, but halfway up in the middle of the country. And I live just south of there in a national park that is called the Peak District. This piece, or this composition, belongs to a particularly British tradition of writing works inspired by landscape. And these landscapes are not usually very beautiful ones in the traditional sense, but they are often bleak and very dramatic. And here you can see on this slide a number of examples. One of the most important first examples of this tradition is a piece called Egdon Heath by Gustav Holst, who's most probably more renowned and famous for his piece called The Planets. Anyway, Egdon Heath is a piece I would very much recommend to you. It's extremely quiet all the time and was inspired by a landscape described in Thomas Hardy's novel, The Return of the Native. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you any pictures of that because we've managed to build houses on that landscape, so it no longer exists. But it's a great novel and it's a wonderful piece. The next piece there is by Peter Maxwell Davies called Stone Litany, written in 1973. And it's inspired by a prehistoric burial chamber on Orkney. So if you remember that map of Britain, Orkney are the islands right off the top of the tip of Scotland. And that burial chamber is called Maze How, and it's in a very mysterious landscape. The next piece is Harrison Birtwhistle's Silbury Air, written in 1977, and inspired by Silbury Hill and Avebury Stone Circle in Wiltshire. And that's at the other end of the country, right down in the south, near Stonehenge, which you can see on that map as well. Then there's John Caskin's orchestral piece Orion over Farne, 1984, which is inspired by the landscape of the Farne Islands, which are just off the coast of Northumberland, which is just north of Newcastle, on the right-hand side of that map, so quite far north. And then with the next example, Michael Finnis's Red Earth, we have a piece inspired by actually a landscape in another country, even though he's an English composer, And in this case, it's this outback in Central Australia. Okay, Oscar, could we go through those, please? So the first one, this is Maze Howe in Orkney. So this is a very ancient burial chamber, and it's a very mysterious landscape that it's in, that inspired Maxwell Davis's piece. Can we have the next one, please? This is Silbury Hill. That hill on the left-hand side is man-made. It took something like 40,000 people 10 years to make it. We have no idea why they did it. It's about 4,500 years old, and it's connected to the stone circle at Avebury, which is in the slide next to it, which are massive stones, much bigger than the ones at Stonehenge, which is not very far away. Again, it's a very mysterious and very bleak sort of landscape. Can we have the next one, please? This is the dramatic landscape of the Farne Islands off the coast of Northumberland, which inspired John Caskin's piece. And finally, next one. This is the famous Ayers Rock in the middle of Australia, where the earth is very red, as you can see, and it inspired Michael Finnis's piece called Red Earth. So I would regard my own piano quartet, Tears of Time, as very much in this musical tradition. The title is taken from a chapter in Stephen Gould's book, The Structure of Evolutionary Theory, but my piece has actually nothing to do with evolutionary theory, but it felt appropriate for a piece that starts with lots of different musical strata, or tiers, as we would call them, which reflects what one can often see in the landscape of the Peak District. Can we go to the next one? So this is a typical site in the Peak District. There you can see lots of rocks, and the rocks are layered on top of one another. So in English, we would call them layers or strata or tiers, spelled T-I-E-R-S. And that's why I chose that title as appropriate for my piece, because it explores the idea of strata or tiers. Tears is also a pun because it could be spelt T-E-A-R-S in English, which obviously has to do with crying. Another reason why the piece is concerned with reflecting the Peak District where I live is because it was written to mark the retirement of my friend and colleague, the composer John Caskin, from the University of Manchester in 2008. At the back of my house, there is a beautiful reservoir, and John used to live on the other side to me. We could in fact wave to each other from our gardens and shout to each other to arrange going down the pub. The picture you now have is of the reservoir, which became very famous last year because the dam at the end of it broke, and it threatened to flood the town of Whaley Bridge, which is where I live. What you can see there is an RAF Chinook helicopter desperately trying to block up the big holes that have appeared in the dam, and which luckily they did. But it meant for a whole week last year, we had the world's television and media here all reporting on this. And it was a very scary situation, because if that had flooded, thousands of people would have been killed. So, as an act of homage to John Caskin, I took the melody from the end of his own piano quartet, which is played by the strings. Is that it? Yes, it is it. Yeah, which is played by the strings and placed at the end of my own piece. So that's the beginning of that. And can we go to the next one? So in that those two slides, the strings are playing in unison and they're playing a melody together that I took from John Caskin's piece. In the lead up to this particular melody, I wove melodic fragments in the cello and viola around accelerating strata, so that everything comes together at that point where the quotation from John's piece begins. The viola and cello fragments are based on transformations which gradually work towards this melodic idea, and these are those transformations. So what happens is, you can see the cello has very large intervals which gradually get smaller and smaller until they become the intervals of part of that melodic line at the end. And then in the viola, you can see that it starts with much smaller intervals and gradually expands out to become part of that melodic line at the end. So this is called a technique called transformation process. It's one that was developed by my teacher, Peter Maxwell Davies, particularly in the 1960s. And he developed it from the Finnish composer Sibelius, who used this type of thing in his symphonies. So here that accounts for the melodic fragments that you hear in the cello and viola. The piece then has 4 different strata. Can we go to the next one, please? So these are the 4 strata or layers or tiers that the piece is built out of up until that final 2 pages. So the first it consists of high chords in the strings using all intervals that are available. And this was particularly inspired by the bright sunlight that you can occasionally get in the Peak District, which can be quite blinding when you're up at the top of the peaks. And these chords are animated by tremolos, trills, and repeated piano figuration, with the trills and the tremolos using a subset of intervals from all the ones available. Then there's a low plodding music in the piano, which is very low down, and again is all interval, except that it highlights minor 6, major 6, minor 7, and trills, tritones as the main intervals used. The third one is again a fairly low strata and consists of a Hocketing staccato piano and pizzicato idea to begin with, that is then developed into a pizzicato and piano chords that are in steady 8th notes by the end of the piece. And then finally, in the middle of the texture, and middle register, there's this triplet portato close harmony idea, just using a few intervals. Can we go to the next? So here, over the next few pages, we can see these in action. So here on page 1 of the piece, you can see the very high first strata. Can we go to the next page? So that very high strata continues for the first of those pages, and then on the next one, you can see the very low plodding one. And then we're on here, that plodding one continues, and we get our first little fragment of melodic material in the viola there. And then at the end of the first system, the first indication of or first use of the portato material. So these different strata are very much differentiated by which register they occur in and what type of material they use. Over the duration of the piece, they get faster and faster and cross-cut with one another at a more and more frenetic rate. It meant that by the end of the piece, they built up such a lot of momentum and energy that when I came to quote John's piece, which occurs in his piece, just simply in his own piece as a string melodic line, I had to somehow wind that energy down. So while you get the quotation from John's piece in those last 2 pages of the score, the piano gradually actually winds down with a series of fracturing chords against it, so that the piece can end with that energy that's built up having been dissolved. This piece was actually inspired by a real walk that John and I once did in the Peak District together, because it's very good walking country. And in fact, those viola and cello fragments that I've discussed are a bit like 2 figures in the landscape who have a dialogue that gets ever more animated as they get towards their goal, or the goal of their journey. And in the case of this particular journey that John and I took, it was a long walk with many hills and took quite a time. And at the end of it, there was a fantastic pub. Can we have the pub? Oscar? That's it, great. A pub called the Beehive in the village of Coombs, where I think I've taken some people from Mexico who visited us. on occasion. So just as the piece resolves into that final melody that the strings play, so our journey resolved into a few pints of very nice beer. So, Oscar, could we play the piece, please? Okay, can we go back to the PowerPoint, please, Oscar? Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to discuss my violin concerto, which was the last work I had premiered before the COVID-19 pandemic struck in the UK. It was written in 2018 and 2019 to a commission from the BBC and premiered in November 2019 by the BBC Philharmonic in Manchester under Ben Gernon, conductor, with world-renowned violinist Caroline Wiedemann as the soloist in the Bridgewater Hall in the city. It was then broadcast on the BBC, so I was very fortunate to have such a high-profile event. Although my concertos are not easy to play for the soloist, I am less concerned with virtuosity in the solo part than with exploring relationships between the soloist and the orchestral mass, or in the case of my clarinet concerto, between the solo clarinet and a symphonic wind band. So my violin concerto explores a whole range of relationships, from the solo violin playing literally on its own, right through to being absorbed as part of the body of strings. In fact, the title, Violin Concerto, is rather ambiguous as far as I'm concerned, given that there are 20 very good violinists in the orchestra. So does it mean it's a concerto for a solo violinist, or for all the violins, or both? My piece, in fact, plays with this idea right from the first section, as the solo violin only gradually emerges from the orchestra in the slow opening section, and then ends up competing with other solo violins from within the orchestra, before finally establishing itself as the soloist. And I don't know of any other concerto, especially for violin, that does anything like that, that engages with the idea of concerto like that. The work proceeds by alternating slow and fast sections. The fast sections are inspired by nature in that they are informed by animal group behavior. In proper English, every group of animals has its own descriptive word, which ironically is a bit like Chinese. It has the same thing. So in my piece, the first section is inspired by a swarm of bees. That's it, thank you. The next section, can we go back to the previous one now? The second section is inspired by a murmuration, as we call it, of starlings. This is where you get these amazing patterns that groups of birds, starlings, form, usually at evening when they're feeding as a group. So this is just one example of that. And those patterns change really dramatically. It's an amazing sight. The third type of music is formed by a plague of locusts, as we call it. And the fourth is by a cloud of bats. So each of these different types of music, which occur in their own sections, is defined by its own intervallic group, tempo, rhythmic character, and as in Tears of Time, its basic registral area. Can we go to the next one here? So here we have all these different sections and the type of music or type of thing that's inspiring them in summary. So the swarm, the music happens at a metronomic speed of 120 in 16th notes. It's middle register, and it constantly shifts around the whole orchestra. With the murmuration, the starlings one, it's a metronome speed of 80 in 16th notes, high register, played primarily by multi-divided strings, and all the violins often have solo parts. hence why it can be a violin concerto for all the violins. The next one, the Plague of Locusts, is a metronomic speed of 120. It's in eighth note triplets, middle to low register, and again shifting between the whole orchestra. And the final one, the Cloud of Bats, is a metronomic speed of 120 in eighth note triplets, but high register and played primarily by the upper strings and woodwind. The solo violin has a range of different relationships with these groupings. With the swarm music, it soars above once it has won out as in the competition and established itself as the soloist. This type of passage alternates with dance-like music in which the other violins increasingly mimic the soloist's music. As the swarm music continues, the dance sections become more and more frequent until the soloist and all the other violins join in together and play as one. The soloist eventually moves away from this group dance and it dissolves back into the swarm music, the 16th notes. And as this reaches its climax, it drowns out the soloist. The next type of fast music is the one associated with the Plague of Locusts. And in this, again, the soloist plays above the orchestra as a soloist, but draws some of the solo woodwind to its cause. But eventually these drop away, and again, the section reaches a climax that drowns out the soloist. The final type of fast music is the cloud music, or the music inspired by clouds of bats. And it sees the soloist battling with the orchestra, often with fast alternation between one and the other. The murmuration music, which is the only other fast music, is somewhat different to the others, as it's the only fast music which is repeated. It always follows one of the other fast passages and precedes the slow music, except at the very end where it finishes the piece. It therefore appears 3 times, and the violins, the solo violins, relationship with it changes with each reappearance. The first time it occurs is when the climax of the swarm dies down and before the first major slow section. Here the solo violin is in awe of it, as if it recognizes it as an inspiring sight. The second time, it follows the dying down of the Plague music and before the next slow section. This is the most extensive statement of this music and involves the solo violin imitating the other violins. So it imitates the murmuration music. The final and third and final appearance of the murmuration music is for the solo violin alone, and it ends the piece. So the piece ends with the solo violin. It is as if the soloist is imitating the music as a memory of it. This final murmuration disappears at the top of the violin on its very highest possible note, which in fact balances the fact that its very first entry right at the beginning of the piece, or near the beginning of the piece, was on its very lowest note, G. So overall, it demonstrates that the piece covers the whole range of the violin. On this particular slide, you can see the structural outline of the concerto. So it's in 2 bits above each other. So you can see the slow introduction, and then there's a transition. Then you get the swarm music, murmuration 1, and then substantial slow music. Then you get the Plague music, murmuration 2, and then the next lot of slow music. Then you get the cloud music and murmuration 3, which ends the piece, acts like a sort of codetta. So the slow passages are basically for the violin alone. It plays as a sort of soliloquy and the orchestra is very much in the background, often playing just wide space chords which are taken from the very opening slow introduction and used again. And the other instrument that the slow introduction and those two slow sections feature is called the waterphone, which is a very weird and wonderful instrument, usually played by percussionists. And the sound it produces is erratic, but I combined it with upper string sounds, so it sounds very eerie, like screeching of some wild animal in a cave or whatever. Anyway, it gives the piece quite a distinctive sound. Yeah, Oscar, if you found it, we have time to play at least some of it because it lasts about 20 minutes. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for listening. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer any. I can't hear you, Ricardo.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to do it in Spanish and then in English, so you will know what I might say.
Okay.
Somos muy afortunados de tener un compositor de los calibres del Dr. Phillip Grange en nuestro festival. We are so fortunate to have a composer like Dr. Phillip Grange in our festival. Su música es muy simple, pero muy compleja al mismo tiempo. His music is so simple, but so complex at the same time. Su música está muy bien estructurada. Es un ejemplo para nuestros estudiantes de cómo se debe trabajar la estructura a gran escala. His music is so well structured that it is an example to follow for our students in the big structure of composition, of the pieces. And on the other side, as a philosopher, it is inspired by the things and the acts that surround him. In this case, in the acts of nature. But anyway, his music is so full of expressions. And let's see what the people have to say. Comments. Oscar, can you? That one, yeah.
Yeah. By a concert band, do you mean a wind band?
A wind band, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I've written for wind band quite a bit, so wouldn't mind having a go again. Yeah.
And well, if you already have, you can pass it by.
Okay. Well, great.
Mayela says, Phil Goddamn is there saying hello.
Hi. He doesn't live very far from here.
A few blocks away.
Yeah, well, a few miles. Yeah.
Also, will be great if in the future we can invite another great British composer, as it is John Caskin.
Yeah.
But hopefully, it will be great to have you both here.
I'm sure he'd be happy to.
And anyway, I just want to thank you, Phil, because you're always been there for our students. Some of our students have been in England as an exchange student, and all the students that have been there came very happy and with a thankful for the experience you gave them in the UK. Anyone else? ¿Alguien más que quiera hacerle preguntas al maestro Phillip Grange? Los estudiantes aprovechen. Jaso, Jorge Serna, X, a mí, Yeson. Y esto nomás dice Shields. Nikos is here.
Ah. Thank you, Nikos. We couldn't go to Greece this year. I was very sorry not to be able to, but hopefully next year.
And, well, I just say hello to Nikos, to my dear brother Nikos. Anyway, no one else? Well, sorry, Phil, I'm going to say in Spanish. Los siguientes eventos serán este día, los conciertos. Our next two events today. Mayela is asking a question too.
Who was it is the most played in the UK? Gosh.
None.
I can't think of. We don't get many Mexican composers played in the UK, I think, which is very bad. I can't think. Perhaps Camden can think. Oh gosh, right. How do I answer these questions, Ricardo?
As you are doing now.
Okay. What do you want to ask, Jorge, about metric modulations? Okay, the best book about metric modulation would be David Schiff's book on Elliott Carter, especially the first one dating from 1983, which is still available, I think, on certain places. There's a second edition which I don't think is quite as good, but it will do. But that's the best book on metric modulation.
I think Camden was looking for some information about Carter, and I don't remember what else. Who else?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Alejandro Morales, what language was used in the quartet?
Okay, I don't think it has an easy has a term that's easy to just sum it up, but I think my music is primarily based on in all the available intervals, the 11 available intervals, and how you divide them up in different ways. In Schiff's book on Elliott Carter, they call it pan-intervallic writing, which I think is clumsy and it's not exactly true. But that's the sort of way I write. I'm concerned with how you add intervals together in various different ways to create different harmonies and different colors.
So we can say that the language is intervals.
Yeah, intervallic, yeah. It's intervallically driven, yes, absolutely. Yeah. It comes primarily from Elliott Carter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, continuando, los siguientes conciertos para este día son uno de electroacústica en la tarde y otro de cuarteto de cuerdas en la noche. Continue with the festival. Today we have two concerts, one of electroacoustics in the afternoon and at nighttime we'll have the quartets with the fabulous string quartet Cromano, Quarteto Cromano. And tomorrow afternoon will be played also with continue with string quartets, and will be play a piece by Phil. That was from the third festival, which was in 2015, and also a quartet by our dear friend, Greek dear friend Nikos Arizanos, and also local composers as Eduardo Caballero, Ana Karen Garza, y Alfredo Caso. Alfredo Caso just graduated from our school. But anyway, we'll continue with the festival. I hope you won't miss the concert tomorrow afternoon. It will be great. And I want to thank with all our hearts, with all the music department and the university heart, to Dr. Phillip Grange, because well, he's always been here supporting our festival. Thank you so much, Phil.
It's a pleasure, real pleasure. And I will see you again soon.
We hope so.
Yes.
We hope that the pandemic stuff will pass pretty soon, so we can move around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Oscar, and thanks everyone for attending the conference, the Phil conference, which always is interesting. What he has to say, and as I said earlier, he's a doctor with his PhD, which means he's a philosopher, and the philosopher always look at his surroundings, which could be nature or could be the human stuff or the city, and takes those phenomena to make aware the other people of things that are succeeding in our life, and well, that's the work of the composer, is to say what is surrounding, I don't know how to say it, to place what is around, which could be good or could be bad. I don't know. And to question everything around us. To always question what's going on in our surroundings. But anyway, once again, thank you so much, Phil. In the name of the Faculty of Music of our university, and we will continue to work together as long as we have energy.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks to all the students and all the people which attend the Dr. Phil Grange conference. Thank you. We'll see you this afternoon on the concert, the electroacoustic concert. Anyway, thank you so much, and thank Oscar that was behind all this technical stuff to do the transmission. Thank you, and
Thank you.
see you soon.